Hey guys, I'm Matt here with 1HP, and today I'm going to convince you guys that you can have any keybind you want and still stay healthy. I'm going to be going over the current meta with keybinds, how it affects us physically, and why we should focus on other things instead to maintain our physical health. Let's go. So I got interested in the topic of how to optimize keybinds because I made a post on Reddit and I was asked to make a video of what I consider to be optimal, as well as looking into pro keybinds. MJ, who asked me the question, also gave me a really good start as to where to look. So I did some research, I identified what the current meta was, and I definitely was able to learn a lot. And I found that there was quite a lot of variance in the bind distributions, but I'm going to be going into some depth and analyzing the movement of 4 pros while quickly highlighting some of the other bind distributions that I found. So let's talk the keybind meta. So any player that I work with that has hand, wrist, or finger pain, I always ask them what their keybinds are, but I've never asked them to modify their binds, as they're not likely a large contributor to pain. And I want to repeat that. I never ask them to modify their binds because they are most likely not a contributor to their pain. Yes, they influence the distribution of movements, but it's not a main reason why they develop pain or why you develop pain. Oftentimes it's associated with what I preach so commonly, the big 3: conditioning of your wrists and hands, posture and ergonomics, schedule management. And if you haven't seen the video already, I'm going to post a link in the description, but I go into a lot more depth about each 3 of those things. Alright, so here's a little table that I made highlighting the key binds of some of the top players. I'm just going to leave this up briefly because I'm going to go over and analyze 4 pro players: Bugha, Clix, Benji, and Mongraal. And as you guys can see, there's quite some variance with the different key binds, and I'm sure it has to do with what keybind everyone uses, how it's angled, and the individual morphology that influences comfortability on certain binds, meaning everyone's fingers are a little different in terms of their length, how big their hands are slightly different. But what I found mostly is that 2 fingers seem to be used the most often out of all of them, and that's your left index and your right thumb. Okay, let's jump into the analysis of the 4 pro players. Okay, so this is Clix, and his keybinds are shown, and based on how he presses his buttons, it seems that he utilizes his thumb for his wall, floor, and cone, while utilizing his ring finger for ramp. And this is important for us to realize for the next section, because I'm going to break it down in terms of considerations for physical stress. So all we have to remember for Clix is that he has 3 thumb and 1 ring. 3 binds for his thumb, 1 bind for his ring finger. Okay, next we have Bugha, and it seems that he's quite known for utilizing his index finger for every bind, which means he actually has to move his left hand quite a lot when building, especially his index finger. So he utilizes his index for every single bind, so all we have to remember is 4 index. Pretty straightforward, and you guys can see it on the left there. But let's go on to Benjyfishy. So I wasn't really able to find any footage of him showing his keyboard, so we can make a general assumption for science. Maybe if he sees this, he's gonna let us know what finger he uses, but in the end, it's just to prove a point, so it's not a big deal. Based on his binds and what fingers other people use, I'm gonna assume he uses 1 finger for each. Or his ring finger for Q, index finger for C, thumb button for mouse 5, and pinky for left shift. He's the most distributed compared to the other pros. And now for Mongraal. Okay, so this is Mongraal, and as you guys can see with his keybinds, his fingers are also quite distributed, this time with 2 thumb buttons and then 1 index and 1 pinky with the L shift. Okay, now that we know what each of those look like and what fingers each of these pros use, let's talk about physical stress. We're going to start with a little thought experiment that's going to help you guys understand where the actual stress goes when we have different keybinds. And we're going to assume that there's going to be 1,000 actions of building in one game, in one competitive game. And also, we're going to assume, again, it's an assumption, that in a competitive game, we have 50% of them are walls, 20% of them are floor, 20% of them are ramps, and maybe 10% are cones. This is purely an assumption to make it easy for us to make calculations. It might be actually 40, 20, 25, 20, 15, the numbers here on the right. But all we care about are the numbers on the left. So with that in mind, that means we have 500 actions of walls, 200 actions of floors, 200 actions of ramps, and 100 actions cones, right? Again, all an assumption, just to help you guys understand the distribution of load or physical stress on our fingers. And now we're going to bring in the pros. We're going to bring in that pro table. All right, so here's a pro table, and we're going to start with Bugha. As you guys remember, he uses his index finger for everything. So within the same thought experiment, that means he's using his index finger 1,000 times per competitive game. And Clix, if you guys remember too, he was 3 thumb, 1 ring. So his wall, floor, and cone, he uses his thumb. And then he uses his ring finger for ramp. So that means he's doing 800 thumb and 200 ring. Looking into Benji, he uses 1 finger per bind. So it's 200 thumb, 500 ring, 200 index, and 100 pinky. And then last for Mongraal, he has 2 buttons on his thumb. So 700 thumb because of his wall and ramp. And then we have N floor and L shift for cone. And that comes out to 200 index and 100 pinky. So again, this is an assumed distribution, but you can see, yeah, based on how we choose our binds, maybe we can better distribute loads, right? Bugha uses 1,000 for his index finger, whereas Benji only does 200 because he has it more distributed or spread out. So instead of everything going to 1 finger, it can go to multiple fingers. But in the end, I want to argue that it doesn't matter because our tissue's capacity for load, or what I've mentioned as our HP, and let's use the same example. It can be something to the end of 40,000, right? And maybe Bugha, who's quite young still, his can be up to 100k or even 50k in his tank. Relatively, it doesn't matter. If we condition our wrist and stretch regularly, then maybe our capacity goes to 100k or 120k. So what I'm trying to say that is, yes, there are fingers that might work harder than others, but instead of forcing ourselves to change our binds, why not just focus on adopting some easy habits that we can include in our day to increase our HP or restore our HP? If we stretch after every single game, we restore some HP. If we condition regularly, then we can be at 120k. So in the end, it doesn't matter what binds you have. Optimal is what you are comfortable with, and it only ends up this way if you have healthy habits. If you're one of those guys who made it this far in this video and you're saying to yourself, yeah, I don't want to stretch or exercise, then yeah. Then the Benji distribution, or a distribution where your fingers are a little more spread out, like this or this, so the stress or physical load is spread out, that might be for you. But if you end up playing 24 hours in a row, you're still going to harm yourself. So why not just consider adopting some pretty simple habits, and you can start now. Anyways, hope that was helpful and informative for you guys. My one tip for this video is that choose keybinds that are comfortable for you, and then practice, because you're going to get used to a movement pattern to build anyways. And just as with any skill, the more we practice and the more we put effort in learning the skill, which is in this case utilizing keybinds to build, the more easy it becomes for us to perform at our peak, but also make it more second natured. And in science and motor learning literature, we call that the autonomous phase, or the phase where we have a minimal level of cognitive monitoring. Your movements are mainly error-free. You have some automaticity for your movements. You can focus on more competitive aspects and skills because it becomes second nature for you. Thank you guys so much for watching. You guys are the best. Please let me know what you guys' thoughts are. Comment below, share this in the Reddit, share this with our community. And if you guys want to support me, you guys can always check out the first link in the description, which is for my Patreon for a lot of this type of content. Don't forget to subscribe, and I'll see you guys next week for another piece of content.